This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting on over 800 stations on Pacifica and NPR and low-power FM and college and community radio stations, on public access TV and PBS TV stations and both TV satellite networks, on Dish Network Channel 9415, Free Speech TV, 9410 Link TV, and on DirecTV Channel 375. And we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Our headlines are also available in Spanish for any radio station to take, as over 200 are. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama is expected to meet with Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin today. On Monday, Obama and Russian President Dmitry Medvedev agreed to cut American and Russian nuclear stockpiles by at least a quarter and as much as a third. Talks have centered on a new treaty to replace the START agreement on nuclear arms reduction, which expires this December.
Understanding for a follow-on treaty to the START agreement that will reduce our nuclear warheads and delivery systems by up to a third from our current treaty limitations. This legally binding treaty will be completed this year.
President Obama's visit to Moscow is billed as an effort to mend strained relations between the two former Cold War rivals. And Obama said the two leaders are, quote, committed to leaving behind the suspicion and rivalry of the past. Meanwhile, President Medvedev expressed concerns over the U.S. missile defense program in Eastern Europe and added that while the talks are an important step, they, quote, cannot remove the burden of all the problems. For analysis on how much this new treaty will reduce the mass of American and Russian nuclear stockpile, I'm joined now in our Firehouse studio by veteran journalist Jonathan Schell, leading advocate for nuclear disarmament, and the Howard Willens Peace Fellow at the Nation Institute. His most recent book is The Seventh Decade, The New Shape of Nuclear Danger. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Good to be here.
It's great to have you with us, Jonathan. So what is the significance of the meeting that President Obama is having with the two Russian leaders, Putin and Medvedev?
Well, there are two Russian leaders, and as it happens, there are two treaties that are running concurrently, so it's a little bit confusing and difficult to assess the agreement. One of those treaties is the START I treaty. And believe it or not, that was signed way back in 1991 and is still in effect because the START II and III treaties never actually came into effect. And that's one that runs out at the end of this year. The second treaty was negotiated by George Bush in 2002, called the Moscow Treaty or the SORT Treaty. Now, what's confusing is that that second treaty ordained that decided that by the year 2012, Russian and American arsenals would be reduced to 1,700 to 2,200 warheads per side, depending on certain factors, which number within those it would be. Now the news comes out that the current treaty will reduce the warheads to 1,500 to 1,675. So by some accounting, that comes to, you know, as you were saying, a quarter to a third of the warheads down. But by another accounting, it only reduces the lower floor or ceiling negotiated by the Bush administration of 1,700 to 1,675. So if you want to look at it that way, it's a 25 warhead reduction. That's a little bit tendentious, to put it that way. But the numbers really aren't as impressive and as there's often said to be or commonly said to be. And I think the whole result is really quite disappointing.
What do you think could turn it around? I mean, you have the picture on the front page of the New York Times on Sunday, the long arc of a nuclear-free vision, Obama's youthful idealism-shaped agenda to eliminate global arsenals. And it's a picture of piece that he did in college for a paper at Columbia called The Sundial. He was there with the massive anti-nuclear march in Central Park in the early 80s.
Yes, he was. And it shows that his interest in this is long and deep. And that's a very encouraging thing. So it means that when in Prague a month or two ago, he announced that he would adopt as a goal for the United States the elimination of nuclear weapons from the Earth. It means that we can take that a little more seriously because of the depth of his interest. And also in the Senate, he took an interest. So we can have a hope that this very modest and I would say a disappointing result is only a step in a larger effort that will unfold across his presidency to get more serious about it. But quite frankly, this particular outcome doesn't show any signs of the audacity that he liked to talk about in the campaign. Not yet.
Why not set a target of 0 warheads? What would that mean?
You know, one of the great riddles of the nuclear danger at present is that we really don't know why Russia and the United States insist on pointing many hundreds and more than 1,000, couple thousand nuclear warheads at one another. You know, back in the days of the Cold War, there was a kind of a political basis. You could agree with it or you could disagree with it, and some, including myself, thought it was absurd for any reason to threaten to annihilate both sides and perhaps the world into the bargain. But when the Cold War ended, the political referent, the political basis or foundation for these arsenals dissolved. And since then, they've sort of drifted into a kind of a policy-free zone, just through a kind of stupid momentum. And so we've wound up with a situation that has no political foundation in which these two countries are still threatening to annihilate one another on hair trigger alert. And it's a kind of, we'd like to think that something as important as a nuclear arsenal would have a reason behind it, but none has really been articulated for the last 20 years. So it's a truly weird situation.
What about just good business? You keep making these weapons. It's good for the defense and the war industry.
Well, those forces of money, the military-industrial complex, it's always been with us. It's always, a powerful influence, and it probably prevails in the absence of a countervailing influence. Now, what we hope to see with Obama would be that countervailing influence, but we're kind of still waiting.
Talk about the other nuclear powers.
Well, there are 9 nuclear powers in the world now. In addition to Russia and the United States, there are England, France, Israel, Pakistan, India, China, and North Korea. And part of the reason that Obama has announced the goal of the abolition of nuclear weapons is to try to get leverage over proliferation. Because the great problem with the overall sort of architecture of the nuclear dilemma now is the double standard, in which these 9 countries, including, of course, the U.S. and Russia, which have 95% of the arsenals, are really basically saying that they can have their weapons forever, but everyone else should do without them. And sort of diplomatically, morally, strategically, politically, any way you want to look at it, that's an unworkable position. And so if Obama announces that he wants to get rid of nuclear weapons, on the rhetorical level, it solves the double standard problem. But then it leaves the question open. Is that a real goal? Is that something that the United States will actually pursue and achieve? In which case it really would solve those political problems and get everyone on the same page. Or on the other hand, is it a kind of rhetorical flourish that's really only meant to wave in the face of people who would proliferate and say, see, we're going to 0, so you shouldn't get into this business, while we really have no intention of doing anything like that?